All right, welcome into the ArtGibbs Sports Business Podcast. This is episode 21, and in this episode, we're going live from Inglewood, Colorado for the third quarter earnings conference call of Formula One Group. All right, so just outside of beautiful Denver, the Liberty Media third quarter earnings call took place 9 a.m. Central Time this past Thursday. We were on the call. There's a lot of great information on the financials. Of course, we did in episode 10, we did a little bit of work on the financials during the COVID era. This is still the COVID era, although it's a much different quarter for the Formula One Group. Instead of doing no races, they did 10 races, which is a record. So they went from a record of fewest races, i.e. none, to a record of most races, 10. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get into that. On the board, we've got who was the first athlete to make $1 million in a year. That's the question for this episode. Who was the first athlete to make $1 million in a single year? And we will also look at the answer from the previous question. So the previous question was, who was the first corporate sponsor for the Olympics? That, of course, was Coca-Cola, and that was in 1928. We mentioned the year on the previous podcast, but it was Coca-Cola who was the first corporate sponsor. So now in this episode, so again, the first athlete to make $1 million a year, that's the question on for this week. And again, I just kind of want to run through a couple quick things. If you have interest, again, go to the ArtGibbs Sports Business Podcast. We're on YouTube. You can subscribe there. That would be fantastic. All these episodes go up on that channel. We also have the ArtGibbs channel on YouTube, which is more kind of, again, financial videos. Subscribe. We'd much appreciate it. So we'll get right into it here. We won't waste any more time. Thank you for joining us. So Liberty Media, they had their earnings call. And if you go back to episode 10, if you have interest, and I'll put the link below. In episode 10, we look at Formula One's financials in a quarter that was really affected by COVID insofar as they didn't have any events. So we got to glean some information there. We got to know, kind of what costs stayed through that they had to deal with, what costs they were able to take off, in not having the events. This quarter is, again, still a COVID quarter. It's a little bit different. They had, instead of no events, they had 10 events. So it was a record number of events. The previous quarter, in 2019, they had 7 events. So this, again, was a different quarter. We gleaned some more information. We got to see, some of their sponsorship deals that were, they had to sort of give up some money from, and some that they held on. We got to see all of that in this quarter. So again, this call, it kind of joined. And again, Liberty Media has several components to it. They have SiriusXM, Live Nation, they own the Braves, and then Formula One Group as well. So it's all one company. So on the conference call, they go through all 3 of those major entities. At the time of this call, 13 races had taken place out of 17. So normally there's about 20. This year they're dropping it to 17. Some of the races canceled, and they had to do multiple races at new locations, than they had in the past. But again, the conference call came in when they had done 13 races. They had 4 races remaining. Lewis Hamilton, of course, already crowned champion, and that brings up a question of is Lewis Hamilton the greatest driver of all time? That may be something for a future episode, or a different episode, or another conversation, or for someone else to decide other than us here. But certainly that is now something that's being talked about. Michael Schumacher, Ayrton Senna, these people probably have a claim, and a lot of fans out there as well. They have a lot of fans, so those fans would probably say that they're higher up on the list, but that is something interesting. So we're going to go through the financials here in a second, but I'll just kind of highlight some of the color from the call first. So again, they had 13 races at this point. Lewis Hamilton had been crowned champion. They renewed a new Concord agreement, another 5 years. So the Concord agreement, for those that don't know, and again, we've done an episode on that as well. That's really what governs the relationship between Formula One, the Formula One group, and the teams. So the teams are, franchises to some degree. I mean, they're set up differently, but like in the NFL is basically made up of the 32 teams. It's not. There's a technical entity that's different, but the teams are the NFL. The 32 teams are the NFL, and the NFL, organization, and Roger Goodell, the commissioner, is there to, be a force that's able to mediate and apply rules across all of the teams and keep the teams in check. But the ownership, the equity really remains within the teams. Formula One group is different, but there is an agreement that, the teams abide by, and that Formula One group abides by, and that sort of divvies up the pie to some degree. That is the Concord Agreement. And that was renewed for another 5 years. They did during this quarter. Formula One is the fastest growing sports brand on social media. They have had 17% growth through March through September. 17% growth. Esports, they're racing on esports. They had a $750,000 prize pot. And again, this is for additional engagement as well as competition, but it's engagement really, because a lot of the fans do these races. They're competitors in their own right, but they are fans. There is a salary cap basically coming in, a spending cap coming into Formula One. There's going to be a new leader of Formula One. Carney, of course, is stepping aside in January 1st. And the new engine will be, again, looking to be a lower cost engine and work through their sort of sustainability goals. Another note by Carney is that Ferrari not being at the top in Formula One does have an effect. It does have an effect on the viewership. It has an effect on the money that they can make, the people, filing in and watching. Ferrari is their biggest brand. When Ferrari does well and when Ferrari's at the top, Formula One's able to have, bigger, better, badder revenue. Ferrari, of course, has not been doing well, and that's hurt Formula One and sort of their overall numbers. Let's see, are there any other highlights I want to jump into here? And this, again, this is not something super technical, but they did not enforce all of their contracts to a T. Carney talked about, there's certain contracts that they could have really held their ground